Alright, welcome. I know that I have already went over this video with this lesson with most of you, but for those of you that missed it, or for following years, 5, multiplying, dividing positive and negative decimals. So we're going to be multiplying and dividing decimals, which was a last year, the 6th grade topic. But what is new this year is the negative part of it. So, multiplying and dividing decimals, but the overall I can statement is simplifying operations with rational numbers because decimals are rational numbers. So, steps for multiplying decimals. The first thing you need to do is estimate, but I have to tell you, before I do that, when I have negatives and positives, is I look at this first, whether my answer is going to be negative or positive, because I don't want to forget that. I cannot tell you how many times people drop negatives and then they get the answer wrong because they've dropped a negative. So negative times a negative, we know, I hope, negative times a negative is a positive. So I know my answer is going to be a positive. After that, the sign doesn't matter. Then we're just going to estimate to make sure that it makes our final answer makes sense. So we have 2.4, which is about 2.5, times 1.2, which is about 1. So we know that our answer should be about 2.5. That is our estimate. And that's important because some people, not any of you I'm sure, but some people just, put two numbers together, whether they add, subtract, multiply, divide. They don't think about what they're doing. And so whatever answer they get, they write down and they don't ever think about whether it makes sense to the problem. So we know that we're shooting for about a 2.5. So we're going to stack them vertically. And in this case, the decimals line up, but when you're multiplying, the decimals do not need to line up. You need to make sure that the last digit is in line with the last digit here. That's how you line it up. So you're stacking them vertically, not worrying about the decimal sign, unlike the adding and subtracting. All right, 2 times 4 is 8, 2 times 2 is 4, 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 2 is 2. We carry it down, and then we know where to put the decimal point because this is how we do this. There's one decimal here and one decimal here. So that accounts for 2 decimal places. So we need to account for 2 decimal places here. So our answer is 2.88. We came up with about 2.5, but remember we rounded down, we rounded up here, but down by quite a bit here. So 288 makes sense to me. It's about 2. And again, it's positive because it was a negative times a negative. That's the new part. Negative times a negative is a positive. All right, next problem. We have a negative times a positive. So I know that my first step says estimate, but I always deal with the negative times the positive first. Negative times a positive is going to give me, so for my answer, negative times a positive is a negative. So I know I'm going to have a negative answer. So now for my estimate, 4.08 is about 4. 0.8 is about 1. So I have about 4. So I know it's not going to be exactly 4. One of the mistakes that people make is now using these numbers to do the second part. But the second part is actually finding the answer. So we need to use these numbers. Now that we've dealt with whether the sign of the answer is going to be positive or negative, we can ignore that negative. So I'm going to stack the numbers, 4.08. And I'm not going to worry about where the decimal is. I'm just going to put this last digit underneath the last digit here. So 0.8 like that. And I'm going to multiply. So 8 times 8 is 64. 8 times 0 is 0 plus 6. And then 8 times 4 is 32. And then to find my decimal place, there's 1, 2, 3. Let me point that out better. 1, 2 places after the decimal and a third place. So we need to have 1, 2, 3 places after the decimal here. So our decimal is going to be here, 3.264. And so then let's check it with our estimate. Our estimate was about 4, so it's less than that, but remember, we had this one that we rounded down, and we had this one that we rounded down, so we knew that it was going to be less than 4. So my answer, I'm going to carry it down here to my answer place that I outlined beforehand. It was negative times a positive, which is negative. So negative 3.264 is my answer. Alright, I'm not going to do this whole slide with you. I'm just going to show you. Some people still struggle with long division. So when you're dividing, and believe me, the problems that you are going to be given are not as difficult as these. But I just want to remind you of long division. So this is the dividend. So it goes in. It goes in. This is the divisor. It goes out. And then our answer is going to be the quotient. So now we have to do some arithmetic. So 12 goes into 109 how many times? Well, 12 goes into 120 10 times. So I'm wondering, I'm going to make a guess over here off to the side. 9 times 2 is 18. Carry the 1. 9 times 1 is 9 plus 1. So 12 times 9 is 108. So that's less than that, so we know that it works. So I'm going to put, it went in 109, so I'm going to put it above the 9. And then I'm going to subtract. How much do I have left out of there? What is my remainder? My remainder is 1. But now I have to take whatever is remaining, and I'm going to pull it down to 12. So 12 goes into 12 how many times? 1. Oh, you know what? I wrote the problem wrong. I apologize. That's supposed to be an 8. So I'm going to make this an 8. But still, it goes into 18 one time. So I'm going to bring the 12 down. 18 minus 12 is 6. Now, with whole numbers, this is our decimal point. So we're going to bring this up. So now 12 goes into 1098 91 times with a remainder of 6. But we want a decimal. So we're going to have to add a 0 and bring that 0 down here. Now 12 goes into 60. Now I know it is 5 times because I've done this many times. But if you have not, if you don't know that, you might want to think, okay, what could I multiply 2 by to go into 0? So what 2 times what equals a number that is multiplied and to get 0? Well, 2 times 5, so 5 times 2 is 0. Carry the 1. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. So it is 60. So then I am going to have a remainder of 0. So negative 1098 divided by 12 is not 91.5. Negative divided by a positive. So we talked about this. I do this first. Negative divided by a positive is a negative, and then it's a negative 91.5. All right, I'm going to skip this for the sake of time because most of you have attended session. I'm just going to talk about what happens if you're dividing a decimal by a decimal. So first, negative divided by a negative is a positive. So I know my answer is going to be positive. So I'm going to set up the dividend goes in. So I'm going to drop the negative and just write this. my divisor goes out. Now here's the thing, it is not easy to divide by a decimal. So we're going to get rid of that decimal by multiplying by a power of 10, like we did with scientific notation. So with scientific notation, we know if we want to clear the decimal, we have to move it one, zoom, zoom, 2 places. So we're multiplying by 10 squared, which is 100. But we have to multiply everything by that. So we're actually moving the decimal 2 places here because we want to get rid of the decimal in the divisor. If we move it 2 places here, we're going to move it 2 places here. So now here is my decimal. And then from there you can continue the division. Again, this is not a fun problem because there's so many big numbers. What you need to remember is that the problems, if you look at the review, the problems are a little bit smaller. It is that negative divided by a negative, negative divided by a positive that you have to remember. So right there. All right, go on to your assignment. Thanks so much. We out.